Hey, we're talking about technology to mitigate crop loss risk. That's right. Technology you can employ in your fields so that you'll know exactly what you're up against. That's what we're talking about in this edition of The Business of Agriculture. Hey, Damian Mason here with a question before we hop into this episode of The Business of Agriculture. If you farm for a living, you employ a lot of amazing technology, from your inputs that you put into the soil to the tractor that you sit in, your combine, and the amazing data that it harvests. But has your soil analytics kept up technologically with everything else in your farming operation? I would venture to say that no, it is not. Sure, you check for your nitrogen, your phosphorus, or potassium, your micronutrients as well. But what about disease pressure? Do you know what diseases and what pests you're going to face next year? No, you don't. But you can now figure that out with PatternAg's predictive analytics. Think about it. They can tell you now with testing what the likelihood of facing nasty diseases, things like cyst nematode or sudden death syndrome, what the likelihood of you having this in your field, then you know how to prepare, how to treat, and where to invest your money. It's using technology to make you bigger yields and therefore make you bigger money. Go to www.pattern.ag to learn more. They are pioneering the way in predictive agronomy. Hey, it's Damian Mason. Welcome to another fantastic episode of The Business of Agriculture. I got Mike Tweedy with PatternAg. You know about PatternAg. They've been sponsoring The Business of Agriculture for a long time. He's not here to do a pitch. He's here to talk about the predictive ag report that came out for 2024. Most importantly, how you can actually utilize new technology to understand what is in your fields. More importantly, what risk you face in your fields, pathogens, disease, and getting in front of it. Also, he's got some really cool new stuff to talk about on scouting, which he calls an autopsy, and also about bio-fertility and getting phosphorus that's already in your soil up into your plants. Some pretty cool stuff. If you're in the business of agriculture, I think this is where things are going. We're talking about an industry that has, let's face it, and I worked in ag retail briefly when I was an intern for DuPont. You know what? We over-apply. We sell the hell out of stuff. Hey, you know what? Spend $17 more and put this product out there. Can't hurt. Well, I think that we've over-applied. My friends at Extreme Ag would say that religiously, that, you know what, we've put on stuff, and we put on stuff. Hey, it's cheap insurance. Just go ahead and throw more stuff out there. But you know what? A lot of times we're putting stuff out there that doesn't get utilized. That's one of the angles we're going to talk about. Also, we're going out there and we're kind of shooting off the hip. We don't know what our disease pressure is. We don't know what pathogens we're up against. So we're going to talk about all that. Mike Tweedy is going to tell us about some pathogen pressure maps, which I think is the cool thing. The first thing we're going to lead off with about, you did a predictive ag report, and now almost like a heat map, we can look at where stuff is and where it's a greater risk. For instance, tar spot, which is coming to northern Indiana where I live. So talk to me. Predictive ag report. Big enough setup, right?
Yep. Thanks, Damian. Great to be back with you again. We just released our 2024 predictive ag report. It's the second version that we've released, and some really interesting information in there that you can go to pattern.ag and then download your own copy. It doesn't cost anything. But what it does is we talk about what the pathogen risks are and where the risks are the heaviest, based on pathogen load that's in the soil. So we're looking at the soil biology to find out what are the things that are in that soil that are going to negatively impact corn and soybean yields for this upcoming season. And so we've developed a series of heat maps based on all of our aggregated anonymized data that shows where pathogen pressures are the heaviest and where we need to really look at areas where we need to, manage for those risks where we may be under managing today.
Yeah, so I call it a heat map, and it's not arbitrary. It's based on that you guys have been out here for several years, and your whole thing is predictive analytics, predictive agronomics, if you will. What's the likelihood that we're going to have cyst nematode or corn rootworm or whatever these things are? Because sometimes you're not treating it, and there's a 77% chance based on what your diagnostics have already, or your analytics have already pulled up, that you're doing it. So we're getting better about, it's like playing the odds, right? You should do this treatment because. And so one of the big ones, let's talk about corn rootworm. I think it's always been a problem. So do I need your heat map? Do I need your pathogen pressure map to know that corn rootworm is a risk? It seems to me that that's the one that's probably the slam dunk. Pretty much, if you are in the corn belt, you've got this risk.
Yeah. So there's two parts to that. of why you would want to know what your pressure or if you have pressure. One, if you're south of I-80 in Illinois, chances are that most of the fields there are not going to have heavy corn rootworm pressure. Okay, if you're north of I-80, it's going to be pretty high. And we had a very mild winter this year, so I expect corn rootworm to be especially damaging. But what we also inform is, where is it really heavy? Like Iowa. If you look at our heat map for both northern and western corn rootworm, eastern Iowa and western Iowa are the epicenter of that. And so why is that important? Okay, yeah, you're going to trade up. But if we find that you have more than, let's say, 10 eggs in that field on average, you're going to need more than just a trait stack. So it's not about whether you trade down or trade up. It's whether you need to trade up and use an in-furrow insecticide, because I believe we're going to see many areas of the fields in the Midwest that are going to get the trait stack is going to get overwhelmed by the amount of pressure that's going to be there this year. So understanding what you have in those fields then informs on what you need to do.
Person listening to this right now might just say, well, based on what you just said and based on the mild winter, et cetera, maybe I don't need to buy your service. I'll just go ahead and put in-furrow insecticide in. And you're going to say, yeah, but there's areas that still might be a waste of money, because even given that it's going to be worse, like you said, it's going to be bad enough that a trait doesn't handle it. Are there areas that don't need anything?
Oh, yeah, lots. We've got organic farmers, we've got conventional farmers that do not want to use that trait stack for one reason or another, whether they're growing grain for, a delivery point, where they want to know what their pressures are. And so if they don't have any, then they don't have to trade up. Or if they have very light pressure, they just might go with a double pro and an in-furrow insecticide treatment versus spending the money on the trait. So just because you have a heat map that shows that the pressure is high doesn't mean that every field is high. There are going to be fields within that heat spot that are going to be either low or no pressure at all. And so understanding that at the field level is what we really need to know.
My friends at Extreme Ag, particularly Kelly, who's in Iowa and a PatternAg fan, he says, I don't think the traits are worth it anymore, because, even if I do have this problem, I think that maybe the benefit of the trait is now not worth what the price of the trait is, which I find interesting. He's going back to more conventional type seed. And I would think that your technology, if I spend a little bit of money on the predictive analytics using PatternAg, I could maybe trait down and then just use products, which might be a selling point for knowing what my risks are based on using your analytics.
We can tell you with a high degree of precision on a field by field basis which fields are going to need a trait and which fields will not need a trait. And so we're agnostic to the product choices that growers take, but what we do is inform on what they can do, what their options are.
What else was in the predictive ag report of 2024 that you guys put out?
Yeah, so some of the foliar pathogens that we added. So since the last time I was on the show with you, we've added some really key new foliar pathogens like tar spot, northern corn leaf blight, gray leaf spot, Goss's wilt, bacterial leaf streak of corn, and then a number of soybean foliar pathogens as well. And so when we look at the heat maps of tar spot, because that's one that is very well known, people fear it, and as well they should. There are areas that were really surprising that are much heavier in tar spot than what we thought. It was always our thought that it's Iowa, it's Illinois, and it kind of came up the Mississippi River. But what we're actually finding is heat spots in northern Missouri, eastern Kansas, and Indiana. And remember, these are actual analysis that we have run on fields and picked this up. So this isn't just us, putting a model together.
No. So let's talk about Indiana, where I own my farm. You said we're seeing tar spot there, and you know that it's there to a certain degree. You talked about a degree of precision, whatnot. The planters are not even rolling yet in my part of the world, right? It's too wet, but the planters are going to roll. So you're going to tell me ahead of time, this field has tar spot or has 90% chance of developing tar spot? Tell me how this works.
Yeah, so when we do the analysis, we're looking for the actual inoculum. So the inoculum of those diseases that I just mentioned. So what we can do is we can tell you that it's there. We can show you where it is in the field. And so if you've ever done any kind of scouting in your life, and I know that I'm talking to some folks in the audience who have done a lot of scouting, it sure would be nice to know where I need to go in the field and throw up a drone or at least look for expression, because we can show you with a high degree of accuracy on these particular pathogens, as well as all of them, where it is in the field, where we picked it up, and then where you should scout for expression.
You want to talk about the scouting and your comparison to autopsy now, or you want to come back to that later?
If you want to transition to that. I do want to hit Fusarium though, real quick.
Let's talk about Fusarium. Okay, just tease the audience here. Tease the audience that he called scouting basically an autopsy, which I found to be amusing. So we're going to get to that. Fusarium.
One of the things that really resonated within this report, we did about 30,000 acres of research work this past year. And what we found is we actually stack ranked the biggest yield robbers that are most undermanaged. So that's part of the article. If you want to read, you can read into that. But one of the most interesting one to me was Fusarium. It is the biggest yield robber that is the most undermanaged. And what we found in those 30,000 acres of trials that we did is that there was an average of a 30 bushel yield loss in corn when that's average across those 30,000 acres. We had up to 90 bushel yield loss in fields that had high levels or heavy loads of Fusarium. And so the reason why I describe it as undermanaged is because they didn't know how much was out there to begin with. So this is not a criticism at all. But when we can show how much is out there, it will actually overwhelm the fungicide that gets put on upstream treated on corn and soybean seeds. So what we're informing is that if you have Fusarium loads that are high enough, you're going to want to help mitigate that stress with an in-furrow fungicide application at planting, because you're going to be losing on average about 30 bushels if you don't do additional treatment on that. So Fusarium and Pythium and many of those seedling and root rots are just undermanaged. And so what we can inform on is extra treatment that needs to be done to protect that yield.
Well, first off, they're talking about massive amounts of loss, 30 bushel on average, on a national average of 174 bushels produced. You're talking about 20% deduct. Well, we're in an era now of 460 corn or 425 corn, where we end up here. That's more than your margin. I mean, you're now a negative. You're now losing money on every bushel, every acre because of that. Why is it? Okay, is it because they don't know how to use PatternAg type of analytics to find out their likelihood of Fusarium, or is it? I want to think maybe it's out of sight, out of mind. Like, oh well, I don't know, I didn't see it. Corn looked okay.
Yeah, I think it's more of they've never seen how much they had out there. We always know that you've got seedling and root rots, but we assume that the upstream fungicide treatment that goes onto that seed is going to protect it. Yeah. But just like if you have heavy levels of corn rootworm in a field, that can overwhelm a stacked trait, right? Because it's got a feed on it. Well, if you don't have enough fungicide protecting that seed as it germinates, then it's just going to overwhelm it. And so by understanding the levels that you have in there and being able to manage for it, because literally for a couple of bucks an acre, you could put down a very inexpensive fungicide treatment in furrow. Yeah. And you mentioned it just now. I mean, 30 bushels is not chump change. And when you're talking about the price of corn where it's at today, the only way that you're going to mitigate your risk is by maximizing the yield. And when commodity prices are down, you've got to yield more. And so by understanding what is in that soil and being able to mitigate those risks and develop a precise crop plan that will mitigate those risks is super important.
Talked about corn rootworm, we're talking about Fusarium, we're talking about tar spot. Is there anything else on the pathogen pressure map? And by the way, I want to be devil's advocate here. And trust me, I'm a big fan, but the easy answer, I think, is going to be, why not just treat for everything? And I think I know the answer. But before I do that, speaking of money in your fields, if you are in production agriculture, you know that right now commodity prices are tight. You're getting a little bit squeezed. Why not look at ways to diversify revenue on your acres? Maybe you can do that with Truterra. Truterra is focused on supporting farmers at every stage of the sustainability journey. Basically, maybe you can get paid for strip till, reduction of nitrogen. You can get paid for cover cropping, some practice changes on your acres, and you can sign up for a sustainability program. Usually only about a 1-year contract. I've heard the thing, oh, I'll sign up for something, then all of a sudden they control what I do. No, not really. Let's not be freaking out here. Let's just talk about revenue on your acres. Go to TruterraAg.com, TruterraAg.com. They're part of Land O'Lakes. Check it out. I think the easy answer is just treat for everything, regardless of what I don't need to pay for PatternAg services. I'll just go ahead and assume that I'm going to have these things and I'll treat for it. But in a year right now where we're talking about, if you do unnecessarily spend $20 on an acre with inputs that are not really necessary, that could be your margin. We truly might be in a year where $20 an acre is a margin.
Yeah. I mean, look, 2/3 of the spend on inputs is from inputs on growing a corn crop or a soybean crop, right? And
say that again.
What? I'm sorry?
2/3, say it again, 2/3.
2/3 of the spend is on inputs for a crop. 1/3 is on nutrients. We test for 1/3 of that crop today. We need to be testing for the 2/3. Yeah. So you've got dollars that you're going to spend, on average $260 an acre for inputs, right?
That
so
number is
spending dollars. But let's be precise about where we spend it. So we're not saying spend more or spend less. This is spend it in the right way, in the right places to mitigate the right stresses.
You know what? Almost nobody ever breaks it out like that. So 1/3 is on fertility, 2/3 is on other, right? That's what basically we're talking about here.
Yep. All input seed.
And you used a number of $260. I assume that's an average spend on per acre of corn, U.S.?
That was in Northern Illinois. It was our University of Illinois report that we pulled.
Well, it pains me that you're referencing University of Illinois as a Purdue guy, but you know what? It's painful to be a Purdue fan anyhow, because let's face it, I just went to the Final Four and I watched them lose a heartbreaker to a bunch of peckers from UConn. So anyway, different story. So the point is, yeah, you're not even saying don't spend the money or spend more. You're saying, why not know if you're going to spend $260, let's make sure it's apportioned. I think it's about apportioning it into the places where it needs to be.
Yeah. Mitigate the stress that exists out there so you can maximize the yield potential that's in that field. And that's what our information provides back to that grower is, if you're going to spend that money, let's put it in the right place.
Foliar pathogens in corn and soy was something you told me ahead of time you wanted to cover. Have we already covered that? Or do you want to do anything else from the predictive ag report? You want to go into bio-fertility attributes, because there's something that I think is really cool about that one, about solubilization of P. But I want to make sure that we get through all. You're excited about the predictive ag report, and so am I. So what else do I need to know?
Everything that I'm talking about is in the predictive ag report. So if you want to go to bio-fertility next, I can nail that one.
Okay, well, I think, again, especially since I began working with Extreme Ag here a couple of years ago, I mean, it's just loud and clear over and over that we have put a lot of dollars into fertility because that was always what you're supposed to do, and that's the easy answer. And you can have as much fertilizer fling it out there in your soil as you want. If it doesn't get into the plant, what the hell good has it done? And I just saw in the last year, I started realizing how, I'm the FFA kid, the farm kid, and I didn't know this until in the last year, that like 1/3 of what we apply essentially gets into the plant. You're talking about a pretty big spend. And then also the environmental pressure that I think is coming, be it regulatory, USDA programs, what have you. So your product, I'm trying to understand how you think I need PatternAg to help me get more bang for my fertility. And so you're going to tell me how.
Yeah, one of the updates that we made last year was by adding bio-fertility attributes. And so what we're looking at is the specific things that will lead to product recommendations. So one of those that I'm probably the most excited about is phosphorus solubilization. So what we're looking for there from a biological or genomic level are the pathways that exist to break down rock phosphorus that's in the soil to water-soluble phosphorus that can be taken up by the plant. That's a natural occurring process that happens there. And if you want to know an interesting statistic across the Midwest, 60% of the fields that we have tested, actually greater than 60% of the fields that we have tested, are low or have very high risk of low phosphorus solubilization, meaning that the phosphorus is sitting there and you can pour MAP or DAP on it all you want, but the pathways that exist to break that stuff down are not there in the soil. So what does that mean? Like, what does that tell us? Okay, that's great, Mike, but what do I do with that information?
Right.
Well, you look for biological products that have those things in them to naturally break down that rock phosphorus. You can literally mine your own soil. So
I think that's where we're going, this is the good thing about the biological space is it's the add-on. It's the, we didn't used to use surfactants, for God's sakes. Let's just talk about that, and crop oil, things like that. And now the products have it built into them, right? Well, it seems to me that some of these biological products are almost like the next version of surfactant. It's the thing that helps unbind something, helps untap something to get fertility in the plant. I think that's where we're going. Am I right?
It is. I mean, this is the next 20 bushels, right? If you want to understand where the next 20 bushels is going to get unlocked, it's not just from understanding and mitigating the stresses of pathogens. It's understanding what your biofertility attributes are and knowing where to put those biological products. Because at the end of the day, whether you're selling those products or whether you're applying those products, you want to be able to have the same level of consistency that you do with traditional chemistry. And what we inform, we don't sell any biological products. We don't sell any inputs. But what we can do is tell you where to place those products and where you're going to get the benefit from it and the yield boost from it. And so 60%, that's a big, big number. And so that's why there's a lot of interest in these, in particularly P solubilization, but also plant growth promoters and mycorrhizal fungi, because those are the ones that really give they kind of supercharge that plant. And so it helps fight off diseases. It just grows healthier, and the root systems go deeper. Yeah,
all of a sudden it reduces stress, and all of a sudden we have utilization of resources. I mean, that's where I think I tell my audiences, I think the last 100 years, we've made more advancements agriculturally than we made in the first 9,900 years of agriculture. The next 10 years, we might do as much as we did in the last 100. I don't think it's going to be about just yield gain. I think it's going to be about utilization of resource. And that's the exciting part. Now, I'm going to be the devil's advocate. All right, biological products, bacteria enhancement, fungi and micro, rhizal, all that stuff, exciting. Where's PatternAg fit into this? You're not a maker of product.
No, we're not a maker of product, which puts us in a very unique position of truth. So what we do is we measure those things that are in the soil: mycorrhizal fungi, trichoderma species, P solubilization, the genetic pathways that exist there, Bradyrhizobium japonicum. We measure all of those things, and we provide this back in a very simple report that says you have these stresses in these fields and you need to mitigate for this. And there are products out there that exist that work. And so it's really up to that trusted advisor, who is our dealer, to have that conversation with the grower who is getting that service from that dealer to say, okay, Mr. Grower, this is where you need to place these biological products on this 60% of your fields.
And a couple of things. Well, first off, you do this via soil test.
Yes.
So if you're already pulling soil tests, it's just that this is way beyond the NPK and the micronutrients. This is the next thing.
Yeah. So what we're doing is we're taking a 360-degree look at that soil. So it's not just chemistry. We do chemistry as well, but everybody, there's plenty of places out there to get that done. It's looking at the biology that really matters, right? That's what's going to unlock biofertility. That's what's going to unlock and make visible the pathogens that exist out there that's going to negatively impact your corn and soybean crops.
Fully agree on that. Soil testing, which is interesting. When I find out that some farms don't even do soil testing, I'm like, well, that which you do is still caught up in about the 1960s. The 1960s called, they want your soil testing back, kind of a thing. It's beyond just the macros and even now the micros. What about then? You just said something interesting. You're like, hey, we've discovered this is where you've got, solubilization issues, whatever. And if you're going to use a biological product, which is now more popular, but also still there's a learning curve and there's an adjustment. So now you're kind of up against the wall here. You're convincing a farm operator to use something that they maybe haven't used to fix a problem that they're just now realizing, like you talk about solubilization, because they're going to say, my soil test said that everything's fine. You're going to say, yes, it is. But just because there's fertility in your soil, because you flinged it out there, doesn't mean it's getting in the plant. So you've got a bit of a sales job here. You've got sell them on the idea that soil test doesn't equal plant fertility. Then you've got to tell them there's other products to help you unlock and make it more soluble, tapped, whatever. And you've got to use our analytics. There's a triple sale there, Mike.
Yeah, it actually, the conversation is pretty easy, because what the conversation is look, we're going to test for these things out in your field. And if you have risks there, then we're going to mitigate those risks with choosing the right product selection. But yes, I mean, you're exactly right. Nutrients, you can have all the nutrients in the world, but if you don't have these very important bacterial and fungus out there that make that plant healthier, you can have all the nutrients in the world and you're still going to be capped.
Yeah. And I mean, I see it more forward-thinking farm operators realizing, yeah, okay, it's beyond just flinging out fertilizer and saying my soil tests are fine. It's the next thing. But you're talking about, I think you're still talking about an adaptive operator that is ready to tackle these things. Although I think the more should be based on margins, but I think you're still talking about not everybody's going to do this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's always your early adopters, and then there's those that, will come along once they see the advantages and, somebody else has already dipped their toe in the water. But what I'll say is our test, you brought up just a few minutes ago, it's a tough conversation. It's actually not, because our test is easy.
Yeah.
Scouting is hard.
Yeah.
Scouting is really hard. And most of the time we get it wrong. What we can do is, when it comes to a biological product placement, we can take that placement success from 60% on average up to 95+%. So we're knocking off the fields where you shouldn't have put those biological products on.
Yeah. Speaking of biological products, I got to talk to you about redox. You might be noticed if you're watching, you should be watching. I mean, I know you listen. Most of you listen. You're in your car, truck, combine, whatever, tractor. I'm wearing a redox hat right now. You can watch my show on Acres TV. That's the streaming ag online platform started by Brian and Darren Hefty. You can also go on the YouTube channel, Damian Mason YouTube. I'm making a big push this year. I just have never really concentrated on YouTube. I would love it if you would go there and hit subscribe. It's free. I'm going to be putting more stuff out there, because it dawns on me, wait a minute, I can't get passed by all these damn kids and their TikTok videos. No, I'm not going to be doing anything pornographic, or I'm not going to dance, I promise you. Anyway, go to the Damian Mason YouTube channel. Also, you can listen to it. But if you are watching, you see I'm wearing a redox hat. Redox is a company started by my friend Darren Moon 30 years ago. They've been around for 30 years. Not one of these upstart biologicals. They've been around for 30 years. They started in specialty crop and turf. That's right. And they're moving into more broad acre agriculture. So Redox is helping farmers shift from traditional fertilizers to carbon-based technology. Redox bionutrients provides superior nutrition, abiotic stress defense, root growth, soil health, and efficient nutrient uptake. Find out more at redoxgrows.com. And again, subscribe to the Damian Mason YouTube channel. All right. Scouting's hard. And then you said scouting's an autopsy. Now it's time for the great reveal. My buddy Kevin Matthews with Extreme Ag says, if you see a problem out in the field, there's a good chance by the time you're out there, it's already been there for a week, and you're probably talking double-digit percentage yield loss, which kind of goes right back to that thing about Fusarium. Peeling off 30 bushels of corn yield at 426. I mean, you're talking $130. Scouting, it's hard, and also it's sometimes too late. Talk to me.
Well, I got my degree in agronomy. I've done a lot of scouting throughout my, early on in my career, and it is hard. So this is not a criticism whatsoever of scouts, but many diseases look the same. If you look at a number of the corn foliar pathogens and even soybean fungal pathogens, they look very similar. Like red crown rot and sudden death syndrome look almost identical.
Right.
And so we conducted a test last year. We had done it with sudden death syndrome. This year we did it with all pathogens, and we had a split of 50% cornfields, 50% soybean fields, 124 fields total for about 10,000 acres. And so we went in and we tested those fields prior to sending scouts out to, diagnose what the problem was. And so just to give you a sense of how wrong we can be, in fields that were present with northern corn leaf blight, and by the way, we sent tissue samples off to the labs to verify what the diseases were that were misdiagnosed.
Right.
So in northern corn leaf blight, the scouts got it right 10% of the time. Gray leaf spot, they got it right 3.5% of the time. Tar spot, they got right 62% of the time. And then the soybean foliar pathogens were the same.
Which one did they get right? Which one were they close to 2/3?
Tar spot.
So, hey, that's getting it right. But also, you can make the argument they're already too late. Even if they were wrong, but they were wrong more of the time than not. 3%. Yep. One of them was only 3%. Meaning that they actually diagnosed it, and the other 97% missed it, or they misdiagnosed it. Either missed it or just got it wrong.
They got it wrong. So 3.5% of the time, the scouts got it right where northern or gray leaf spot was present. And so one, that in and of itself is troubling. But two, if you knew that you had it out there, then you know what you would be looking for, right? So if you knew in advance that you had high inoculum loads of gray leaf spot, you knew which part of the field that it was in, you could skin that scout out and find it in the field, say, okay, it's beginning to express, we need to get a fungicide application on this field. Soybeans, it was even higher than that. And so I was in a meeting in Iowa back in January, and there's this new disease called red crown rot that people should probably know about, because I asked the folks in there, there's a couple hundred people in this meeting, growers, and I said, who in here has heard of red crown rot? One person raised their hand. I said, well, you probably should understand what it is. You should be able to identify it, because it's on 20% of the fields that are out here in Iowa. And it's about 25%. It's a disease that's relatively new to the Midwest, and it's come up from the Mississippi. So we can tell you what's there. We can tell you where you need to scout. We can tell you what you need to do. But the other thing about scouting, I refer to it as an autopsy, right? If you see sudden death syndrome, it's too late.
Yeah.
You've probably lost 50. If you could see it above ground, you probably lost 50% of your yield already. So there's nothing you can do about it. So it's almost insulting to be told, hey, you've got sudden death syndrome, because there's nothing I can do about it at this point.
Yeah.
But if you know in advance that you can get that seed treatment on there at the right rate to protect and prevent that from happening.
Mr. Tweedy, when you tell an audience in Iowa there's a 20 or 25% chance that you have this thing, red crown rot, you call it red? Yeah.
Red crown rot.
And it's a newer pathogen. It's a newer problem that we didn't even see. Maybe we did see it, we didn't know, but you're saying it's newer. What's the reaction?
Surprise. That's the most of the time. Actually, anytime that we present data like this, whether it's any one of these things, it's a lot of surprise, because they think that they have it, but they don't know how bad it is. They're not quite sure. And so the best feeling that we have is when we can sit down with a grower and our dealer and walk through the results with them, so that they can actually see what's happening and answer the question of, wow, this is why this has been happening in our field. And so one of the most common questions that we get, because people think of soil testing, quote unquote, well, how often do I do this? Can I do this like every 3 or 4 years? Well, how often do you build a crop plan? You build a crop plan every single year.
Every year, right.
And we've got fields that we can go back to 2022 and we can look at every single field. And whether it's pathogen load or bio-fertility attribute, it changes every single year. And the reason why is because there's a direct correlation to what is happening in that environment on the pathogen loads for the coming year. So it constantly changes and radically changes.
I mean, I think about, you and I have been around a couple of days. They're talking about, like, now we're going to wear a device. What's the new thing about wearable technology that tells you about a health issue you're having that you don't know about it? I kind of liken it to what you're talking about, that we either didn't treat something because we didn't even know we had it, and we're still dealing with that. Like you just said, 20 to 25% of the acres are going to have this red crown rot in the state of Iowa, which is a pretty important agricultural state. So I kind of liken what you're talking about to where we're going, because then there's the ability to treat. And when you think about it, I think there's an environmental play here. If you've already got the acre, you've already cultivated the acre, you've already planted the seed, you bought the seed, you've already spent the diesel, you're driving across the field. Now it's a matter of yield, right? Because you're still the amount of input variation, like you even said, if you're spending $260 on, it's not that you're saying spend less, it's probably spend smarter, spend the same amount and reapportion, rebalance the inputs. I think there's an environmental play to be made here of all things, to the detractors outside of agriculture. This is the kind of technology that tells you ahead of time, do this, don't do that. Spend money on this input, not on that. It's kind of an exciting time. I think there's still some skepticism about whether it works, just like there's probably skepticism as to whether or not an Apple Watch on my arm can tell me whether I'm going to have a heart attack on Tuesday.
Yeah, well, let's hope that doesn't happen. But yeah,
my wife actually told me, Mike, just this, I went and I did a full gamut last year. A full gamut. I mean, arm up everything. Okay. And they did a treadmill where it was like going up Kilimanjaro. And I'm like, I'm a hiker. It's a good thing. And then he came in and said, I came home and I said, Lori, my heart is good. And she said, no, your heart is healthy and strong. That's not the same thing as being good-hearted. That's what she told me. She says she took the sensitive side of it. Anyway, yes, I'm not going to have a heart attack because I say my heart is good, but Mrs. Mason says no, your heart is healthy. Anyway,
well, first of all, congratulations on a healthy heart. Second of all, your wife is exactly right that you should go get yourself checked out. You should do it annually, and the same thing happens same thing applies to your fields. Yeah. Because that biology is constantly changing even more than what your body does. And so by understanding those risks when going into the next season, you can build a very precise crop plan and have a very healthy crop.
Address the skepticism. So there's always the skepticism in the room. Is this really going to prevent, am I going to get bigger yields because of it? Because that's what every farmer wants to know.
Well, so what I can tell you is that we're looking at the DNA. We're looking at the genomics of the soil. DNA doesn't lie. If it's there, it's there. If it's not, it's not. And we're looking for the things that are going to knock down crop stress. We give those results back to the dealer, the trusted advisor, and the grower, and we use that to inform on a precise crop plan. Now, it's up to the grower and the dealer to then make those choices, but what we're doing is informing what those risks are and what you need to do to mitigate those risks. So to the skeptics, I would say DNA is DNA. It's either there or it's not there. And our test is completely accurate in that way. And we're covering the entire field, and we're giving that information back in a very intuitive way. And we've been doing this for 3 years now. And growers have experienced huge gains just because of the 3 or 4 changes that they make to their input plan.
And most of the changes that you were having them make was treating for something that they didn't realize they had versus, but sometimes it was you've been treating and you don't even have a real risk of it, right?
It's both, right? It's both. Sometimes you're under managing, sometimes you're over managing. Things like corn rootworm, we tend to over manage for that. Things like Fusarium, we under manage for that. And so what we're going to do is bring that information together and bring a very level, precise way that you can crop plan.
We always talk about efficiency in agriculture. I think it's more about maximization. My friend Ryan Moe talks about that. Let's stop talking about efficiency. Let's talk about maximizing. So we're talking about maximizing the resource. It seems to me that right now we're not maximizing the resources that we apply them. We spend money on them. We're not maximizing them. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that the growers are informed, the dealers are informed on exactly what risks are lying out there in that in that field. And so I know that there's a lot of growers that are in their tractors right now running the planters across the field, and I wish everybody a very safe planting season. But if you're looking for something that's really interesting to read, you can go to pattern.ag, and you can download a copy of the 2024 Predictive Ag Report so you can see what's going to be happening in the fields across the Midwest this year. And you can take a look at some very interesting research that we've conducted that you won't find anywhere else. And then lastly, if you're intrigued enough by that PatternAg report, if you want to learn more, or if you want to contact a dealer, or if you even want to become a dealer, contact us at pattern.ag and we'll help you out.
Contact the dealer, become a dealer, utilize the product. All right, maximization of resources, they can help you do it. Until next time, he's Mike Tweedy with PatternAg, one of my sponsors. I'm Damian Mason, and this is the Business of Agriculture. Well, that concludes another fantastic episode of the Business of Agriculture. This episode was brought to you by PatternAg. You know, everybody in agriculture understands the importance of soil health. We also keep an eye on our soil better than we ever did through advanced soil testing. But what if there was a company that provided predictive analytics, not just checking out nutrients and all the elements that are in there, but also could tell you the degree of risk you face with disease and pest pressure? That's right, PatternAg can do that. They actually can tell you, hey, you're going to have a real issue here. You can proactively treat for corn rootworm or cyst nematode or sudden death syndrome before the problem actually starts costing you yield. Go to pattern.ag, that's www.pattern.ag, to find the nearest rep that can help you start doing better for your soil.